The ballroom glittered with golden chandeliers, their crystals scattering light like tiny suns. Music floated through the air, violins weaving a melody that whispered of elegance, money, and privilege. Everyone present belonged to the city's elite. Men in tailored tuxedos, women in gowns stitched with diamonds, and servers gliding silently with trays of champagne. At the far corner of the grand hall stood a young woman in a plain black maid's uniform. Her name was Amora. She carried herself with quiet dignity, even though her job tonight was to refill glasses and pick up discarded napkins. Most of the wealthy guests didn't even notice her presence, except for when they wanted something. But Amora noticed everything. She had always been observant, soaking in details others ignored. She saw the way people danced across the polished marble floor, how their shoes slipped slightly with each turn of the waltz, and how their laughter rose just a little too high, as if to prove something. Near the center of it all was Mr. Carrington, the millionaire host. He was tall, sharp-featured, and loved for his grand parties almost as much as he was despised for his arrogance. At his side stood his only son, Ethan, a gentle-looking man in his late 20s, who appeared uncomfortable in all the luxury around him. The orchestra shifted into a waltz, the kind of dance that demanded grace, poise, and training. Mr. Carrington clapped his hands dramatically, gathering attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice booming across the room. "Tonight, I have a little challenge to amuse us all." Guests toned, eager for entertainment. Amora paused with her tray, curiosity tugging at her. Carrington smirked and pointed, straight at her. "If she, the maid, can dance this waltz, then she shall marry my son." Laughter exploded around the room, cruel and mocking. Champagne nearly spilled from glasses as people chuckled at the absurdity. Amora's heart thudded. She had not been asked. She had been dared, ridiculed, turned into a spectacle. But behind the laughter, Ethan's eyes met Hayes, eyes that held no mockery, only a quiet plea, and maybe a spark of something else. What no one in that glittering hall knew was that Amora had once been more than a maid. She had been a dancer. And not just any dancer, she was a champion. The laughter rippled through the ballroom like a cool tide, crashing against Amora's heart. Some women whispered behind jeweled fans, their eyes glittering with ridicule. A few men shook their heads, muttering that this would be a joke worth remembering. Amora's fingers tightened around the tray she carried. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the marble floor. But then she saw Ethan again, his face tense, his jaw tight as though he hated every sound of laughter that echoed in his father's hall. Mr. Carrington raised his glass, grinning at the spectacle he had created. "Come now, girl, a simple waltz. Don't be shy. Surely you've seen enough of us rich folks spinning around to understand how it's done." His voice dripped with arrogance, meant to humiliate. Amora's chest rose and fell. Memories stirred inside her, sweaty rehearsal halls, the rhythm of music guiding her steps, the heavy medal she once held after winning her last championship. She hadn't touched the dance floor in years. Life had swept her into hardship, forcing her to take this job as a maid to survive. She set her tray down on a nearby table, her movements deliberate. A hush fell. Nobody expected her to respond. Her voice, calm but steady, carried across the ballroom. "If you wish me to dance, then I will. But remember, you asked for this." The laughter dulled into murmurs. Amora walked to the center of the floor, her black shoes clicking softly against marble. Her uniform was plain, her hair tied back, yet she stood taller now, as if something powerful had awoken inside her. Ethan stepped forward, surprising everyone. "If she is to dance," he said firmly, "then I will dance with her." Gasps echoed. A son of wealth, daring to hold the hand of a maid? Carrington's face twisted in disbelief, but Ethan ignored it. He extended his hand to Amora, and for a moment, time froze. She looked at his hand, then into his eyes. There was no mockery, only sincerity. Slowly, she placed her palm in his. The orchestra waited, violins poised. Mr. Carrington smirked, certain the maid would stumble and embarrass herself. The crowd leaned in, ready for the show. But Amora knew something they didn't. Once the music began, the ballroom would no longer belong to Carrington or his guests. It would belong to her. The crowd buzzed with whispers, their curiosity turning into something sharper, defiance against the arrogance of Mr. Carrington. His grip on the evening was slipping. and he knew it. He slammed his glass down on a nearby table, the crystals shattering into pieces that sparkled under the chandeliers. "Silence!" he roared. "This nonsense ends now. Ethan, you are my son. You will not throw away your future on a servant." His voice cracked with both fury and desperation, but Ethan didn't flinch. Standing tall, he tightened his grip on Amora's hand. "I will not throw away my future," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the hall. "Because my future is mine to choose. And I choose respect. I choose truth. I choose her." The room erupted again, this time not in laughter, not in mockery, but in cheers and applause. A few bold guests even shouted Ethan's name in support. Mr. Carrington's face burned red, his authority dissolving in front of the very people he had always sought to impress. Amora stood silent, though her heart raced. She had not come here for rebellion, yet here she was, at the center of one. Her eyes swept the ballroom, seeing people differently now. They weren't gods in gowns and tuxedos. They were simply humans, fallible and swayed, just like anyone else. One elderly woman, her pearls gleaming, stood and clapped slowly, deliberately. "Bravo," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Not just for the dance, but for the courage. Others followed her lead, rising from their seats in solidarity. Mr. Carrington's hand shook as he tried to command them back into silence, but no one listened. His empire of fear had cracked under the weight of truth and grace. Ethan turned to Amora, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I meant what I said. This wasn't just about a dance. My father's games don't define me, and they will never define you." Amora met his gaze, her throat tight with emotion. "I don't need saving," she whispered, steady and proud. "But I won't walk away from someone who stands with me." Their words sealed something deeper than the waltz had begun. And for the first time that night, Amora felt not like an outsider in this glittering hall, but like someone who belonged on her own terms. The ballroom no longer belonged to Mr. Carrington. It belonged to the rhythm of truth that Amora and Ethan had set in motion. Guests whispered openly now, no longer fearing the scorn of the millionaire. His power was slipping like sand through his clenched fists. "You're making a fool of yourself," one guest muttered to him under their breath, loud enough for others to hear. Another added, "Your son has more dignity than you tonight." The word struck him harder than the applause had. His face drained of color. Amora, still standing tall, turned to him. "You wanted to humiliate me," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "Instead, you revealed your own arrogance. I was your servant, yes, but tonight I was also your equal, if not more." The guests applauded again, their approval now aimed directly at her. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder, undeniable and unstoppable. Ethan stepped forward, his tone steady but firm. "Father, all your wealth, all your power, it means nothing if it's built on disrespect. I won't inherit cruelty. I won't inherit shame. If that means turning away from your fortune, so be it." A hush fell. The weight of his words shattered what little pride Carrington had left. His son, the heir he had groomed, had rejected the empire he built. The older man staggered slightly, as though the chandeliers above pressed down on him. For the first time, he seemed small, fragile even. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The mighty host had been silenced by a maid and his own son. Amora placed a hand over her chest, breathing deeply. "This night was never meant to be mine," she said softly, though everyone heard her. "But I will carry it as proof that dignity doesn't wear gowns, and respect doesn't shine in diamonds. It lives here." She touched her heart, and hey. She took Ethan's hand, holding it tightly. The orchestra, sensing the moment, began to play again, not the mocking waltz Carrington had chosen, but a triumphant piece that filled the hall with hope. Ethan and Amora walked together toward the doors, heads held high as the crowd parted in respect. Behind them, the millionaire stood frozen in silence, left with nothing but the echo of their footsteps and the truth he could no longer deny. That night, the maid who was mocked walked out not as a servant, but as a champion, and beside her was a man who had chosen love and respect over wealth and pride. And for everyone who had witnessed it, the memory of that waltz would never fade. The first notes of the waltz unfurled like a ribbon through the hall, soft yet commanding. Violin sighed, Cellos hummed, and a steady rhythm invited the dancers forward. Ethan guided Amora gently into position, his hand warm against Hayes, his other resting lightly at her waist. For a heartbeat, Amora closed her eyes. She remembered the echo of wooden floors beneath her shoes, the applause of crowds, the way music had once been her sanctuary. When she opened her eyes again, the maid was gone. In her place stood the dancer she had always been. Her first step was flawless, smooth, confident, in perfect time with the music. Ethan nearly stumbled, surprised by the precision of her movement, but quickly adjusted. They glided together, her body leading as naturally as breathing. Gasps broke through the crowd. Whispers replaced laughter. "She can dance," one woman muttered, clutching her pearls. "No, more than that. She's extraordinary." Amora spun under Ethan's arm, her skirt flaring just enough to catch the light. Though her uniform was plain, at that moment, she looked as radiant as any woman in diamonds. Each step was sharp, each turn a declaration. She wasn't there to amuse them. She was there to remind them what true grace looked like. Mr. Carrington's smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed, watching the maid transform his ballroom into her stage. He had expected stumbles, awkwardness, humiliation. Instead, every movement struck with the precision of a champion. Ethan, caught in the current of her skill, found himself smiling. She carried him across the floor with a confidence that lifted him higher than he had ever felt before. In her presence, the world shrank to the rhythm of the dance, and the judgmental stays melted away. The crowd could no longer contain themselves. Applause erupted mid-song, shattering the silence of shock. People leaned forward, captivated, their earlier ridicule drowned by awe. Amora's heart pounded, not with fear, but with fire. She had hidden this part of herself for too long. Tonight, against mockery and arrogance, she would show them who she truly was. And with every spin, every graceful step, she wasn't just dancing a waltz. She was rewriting the story Mr. Carrington had tried to script for her. The waltz surged toward its climax, violins racing, drums echoing faintly like a heartbeat. Amora's body flowed with the music, each movement sharp yet fluid, commanding the entire room. Ethan followed her lead now, his steps surer, his gaze locked on her as if the world beyond their dance no longer existed. When the music slowed, she dipped gracefully, his hand steadying her. A collective gasp swept across the ballroom. Then came silence, thick and charged. For a single breath, no one moved, no one dared to speak. And then the applause thundered. It wasn't polite clapping, not the shallow courtesy of the rich. It was real, unrestrained, a wave of admiration from people who could not deny what they had just witnessed. Even those who had mocked her earlier were on their feet, cheering the maid who had danced like a queen. Ethan helped her rise from the dip, his eyes shining. "You were magnificent," he whispered, voice trembling with awe. Amora allowed herself the smallest smile, though her chest still heaved from the intensity of the dance. But not everyone was applauding. At the head of the room, Mr. Carrington's face had gone stone cold. His glass of champagne trembled slightly in his grip, though his jaw was locked tight. He had wanted humiliation, but instead, his guests were praising the very woman he tried to disgrace. "Enough!" His voice boomed, silencing some of the applause. "This was nothing but a trick. A maid has no place on this floor. Do you truly think one dance changes who she is?" His words cut sharp, but the crowd's reaction was divided. Many frowned, uncomfortable with his bitterness. Amora stepped forward, her voice calm but unyielding. "One dance doesn't change who I am. It reveals who I've always been. You wanted to mock me, Mr. Carrington. Instead, you reminded me of my worth." The room fell still again. The statement carried weight, truth that couldn't be denied. Ethan moved to stand beside her, his presence bold, defiant, and it reminded me of mine. "Father, I will not let you decide who is worthy of my hand or my respect." A murmur spread like wildfire. For the first time, the perfect image of the Carrington family showed a crack, and that crack was growing wider by the second.